Join me as we break down 15, the most we've ever done, clutch trades you need to make before week 11 of fantasy football. I'm so excited for today's video because not only are we doing the most trades we've ever done, we also have a waiver ad for each position, and we also have a new segment called the Buy Sell Player of the Week, where we're going to cover a player that I think some of you guys have to get off your roster immediately, but that same player, some of you should absolutely be buying for the fantasy football playoffs. Welcome into No BS Fantasy Football. So glad you're here, and let's talk about our first trade away of the video, Treylon Henderson. He was absolutely insane with 147 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 reception, and the reason I think we need to trade him away is kind of right here. 14 carries, and without the 2 long touchdowns of 55 yards and 69 yards, he was under 2 yards per carry on his 12 other carries. And we know Ramondre Stevenson is likely to come back next week, maybe the week after. They're essentially going to be splitting the carries. Yesterday, I was able to trade Henderson away for someone like Quinshon Judkins. I was able to trade him away for someone that has much more consistent volume, has probably better touchdown upside on a weekly basis as well. So if you've got a Patriots fan in your league or someone in your league absolutely believes in Treylon Henderson, I would try to sell high after this huge performance and get someone that is going to be more consistent for your team, especially when Ramondre Stevenson comes back. But I would try to trade for Michael Pittman Jr. Very frustrating week here, only 4 points and heading into the bye. That is key. That's going to allow you to buy Michael Pittman Jr. at a low price, especially if he's on a roster with somebody that needs to win every week on the way to playoff. That is a bonus tip for everybody watching here. If you've got players in your league who need to win every week just to make playoffs, they cannot afford any bye weeks, especially for a player like Michael Pittman Jr., who's been pretty consistently a starter for them all season. So if you've got someone in your league who needs to make playoffs, try to get Michael Pittman Jr. for your playoff run, because you can see here the schedule is not bad. Seattle, that could be a little bit of a shootout game. That could be actually good here. Then he plays San Francisco, and if they're healthy, that could be a shootout as well. Then he plays Jacksonville, who's been extremely weak against the wide receiver positions. But I would be trying to trade away Jameson Williams. One of the things our subscribers know is that Jameson Williams actually had the second easiest cornerback matchup of the entire week. That means he was facing a corner that allowed the second most fantasy points per route run in the entire NFL for week 10. He took advantage. He had an insane week. He took advantage, but the matchups are going to get more difficult. Yes, he has a good matchup against Dallas in week 14, but when we get to fantasy football playoffs, he has 2 kind of difficult matchups. He plays the Rams and he plays the Vikings, who have both been a little bit tougher against wide receivers. So while he has 2 good weeks in a row, I think you can actually sell him for something really decent, and you can get someone that's going to be a lot more consistent than Jameson Williams has been throughout this season. Now for our first waiver ad of the video, Alec Pierce, available in 58% of leagues. And that is way too many leagues. Look at his targets over these last 4 games. 10, 5, 13, 7, 35 targets over these last 4 games. He's turning into a top tier option. So some of the same things I said about Michael Pittman Jr. You want to get him for your team. Pretty good schedule, especially as we get to the fantasy football playoffs. If you can't trade for Pittman, getting Alec Pierce off the waiver wire, that's the next best thing. And make sure you guys are subscribed, because not only do we talk about guys that are highly rostered that you should have the waivers, we also talk about guys like Kyle Williams, who are 98% available. He had a huge game. He had 1 catch, but it was still a huge game. And for me, I'm adding him for the playoffs specifically. We've got week 11, we've got week 12, we've got week 13, where we can see if he can continue to grow his role. He has the speed. Drake May is an amazing down the field passer. That fits extremely well together. Plus the bye week 14, week 15, I don't know if I'd play him, but if he's good coming out of the bye, that's where we see rookies start to take a little bit of a leap as well. If he's good week 15, he could really help you out in week 16. So I'm going to add this guy, if only for the fact to not let my other league mates get him, because this was maybe the start of a breakout. And again, if you're in a deeper league or you've got room to chase upside, Kyle Williams is a decent add. I traded for Judkins, and I think he's a great trade for a target because we look at the volume. Look at the volume here. He had 22 carries in this game against the Jets. Look at the schedule too. Baltimore, the Raiders, San Francisco, Tennessee, Chicago to start off the playoffs. Buffalo, week 16, who's been extremely weak against the run, and the Steelers, who look difficult against the running back, but honestly, they've had some pretty up and down performances this season. So the schedule is extremely easy rest of year. He's played some really tough matchups up here as well at the start of the season. So Judkins coming off a 10.5 and a 4.7. This is the perfect time to buy low before he literally wins people their leagues in the fantasy football playoffs. Someone with an easy schedule that I think you should trade away is Jeudy. I know some people are like, well, he got that offensive coordinator. They had some big upgrades. but this week they're playing a Jets team that just fire sailed their whole defense. They lost Quentin Williams, they lost Sauce Gardner, a much easier matchup for Jerry Jeudy this week. And he was pretty awesome. I mean, he had 12 targets, but he's had 13 targets before against the Steelers, only 9.3 fantasy points. Now is a time where he actually has some trade value. He's had absolutely none. He may have been on the waiver wire in some leagues. I know the schedule does get pretty easy, but the Browns are just not going to find success. They know if they stop Jeudy, they most likely win the game. Quinshon Judkins, I think, can do well in these games thanks to the volume, but when we look at Jerry Jeudy in the pass game, it's just unlikely he's ever startable for you. Throw him into a package deal, maybe where you get a great wide receiver, you send one of your running backs in Jerry Jeudy. That sounds like the kind of deal I would be doing to improve my starting lineup. Before we get to our running back waiver ad, available in 92% of leagues, we have to trade for Travis Etienne, who's come out of the bye on fire. In the middle of the season, fell off a little bit. The volume wasn't as great, but after the bye, 22 carries and 5 targets, 16 carries and 4 targets. Amazing opportunity for Travis Etienne. He's really solidified himself back as that RB1. With all the different injuries, all the changes to this offense, he is the consistent piece. And he's got a good schedule to get you to playoffs. If you're one of those teams that's on the edge, you're on that playoff bubble, he's a player with the Chargers, the Cardinals, and the Titans week 11, 12, and 13 who can get you to playoffs. So later, I'm going to give a buy-sell player of the week that some of you should be buying, but some of you should be selling. You may want to sell him to try to get Travis Etienne because he is someone that could get you to playoffs, and you never know what can happen once you get there. Your running back waiver ad is Sean Tucker. This week, he had 53 yards. He had 1 reception, not too bad. He had 9 rushing attempts, not too bad there either. But the difference, the reason why he stands out, he had 5.9 yards per carry. He's one of the first running backs, I think the only running back all season long to have over 50 rush yards against the New England Patriots. Rachaad White was pretty terrible on the ground. Just his yards per carry, extremely inefficient. That's going to give Sean Tucker an ability to take over, at least for one game, at least for 2 games. So if you've got players out on bye, this is the perfect waiver ad to get you through until Bucky Irving comes back. Now, a player I would sell high is Jauan Jennings. We can see the last 2 weeks, he scored a touchdown, 4 catches, 41 yards, 6 catches, 71 yards. But over the last 4 weeks, he's been pretty consistent with 4 receptions, not too many yards, not been over 50 too often. And he's got a pretty tough schedule all the way up to the fantasy football playoffs. Week 11, not too bad against the Cardinals, but then week 12, week 13, tough schedule. And then in the fantasy football playoffs, when the schedule is easy, the easiest possible schedule, Brandon Ayuk could be back. Ricky Pearsall should be back by then as well, which is going to greatly limit his upsides. If you can sell Jennings and say, hey man, look, he's got a great playoff schedule. I need a different position because that justifies it. If you trade him for another wide receiver, there's really no way they're going to buy that from you. But if you trade him for a running back, a tight end, a quarterback, that's going to give you a huge advantage because you can point out this easiest possible schedule, but they may forget about Brandon Ayuk, they may forget about Ricky Pearsall, and they may make that trade for him, and a player that's probably going to lose some of his upside as some of his teammates return. I would trade Jauan Jennings for Jaylen Warren, and that's why you want to hit the subscribe button to this channel. Not only do we have the trade aways, the trade fours, we also pair them up to let you know exactly who to be trading for, and Jaylen Warren is the perfect target to get you to playoffs. He does have a difficult playoff schedule facing Detroit and Cleveland, but especially if you got a bye week on one of your players, try to get Jaylen Warren, who faces Cincinnati, Chicago, Buffalo, Baltimore, Miami in the first round of the playoffs. He can certainly get you to playoffs with this amazing schedule. And then once you're in playoffs, you never know. Maybe you bench him. Maybe you have someone else in your team that starts to break out, but he can certainly get you to playoffs, making him a great trade for target. Now let's get to a strategic waiver wire ad, Cade Otton. Now, if you need a tight end, this is a no-brainer. He's been amazing since pretty much week 5. He does have a little bit of a difficult schedule, but in the playoffs, Carolina and Miami. So Cade Otton is a great ad, but if you do not need Cade Otton, there's probably someone in your league that does. So let's break down a little bit of strategy here, because if you look at the playoff teams in your league and one of them had Tucker Kraft, maybe Oronde Gadsden, and Cade Otton is on the waiver wire, that will be their number 1 target. This is the missing piece to their championship roster. If you're on the edge of playoffs or you're locked into playoffs, look to add Cade Otton, if not for yourself, but to block your league mates who absolutely need this tight end due to some other injuries for their squad. Now we have 2 segments left. We're into our secret segment, the buy high players of the week. The next 5 players are all players I think you should buy high. Then we'll do our quarterback waiver ad, which you guys may be able to guess. And then we're going to do our buy sell player of the week. Some of you should be selling and some of you should be buying. But the first buy high is Emeka Egbuka. Some people may be worried about week 6, week 7, week 8, but he was dealing with a hamstring injury. Week 9, they had the bye. Week 10, he comes back and is absolutely amazing. So don't worry about those bad weeks. If you can trade for Emeka Egbuka, you can expect probably something in this range from the 14 to the 23-point range for the rest of the season. Our second rapid fire buy high is Amon-Ra St. Brown. At the beginning of the season, he was absolutely insane. He's cooled off a little bit, especially with Jameson Williams stepping up, but I'm looking at the schedule and it is absolutely amazing rest of season. The only hard matchup, week 17, but he's facing Josh Metellus. Those of you who are subscribed see our wide receiver versus cornerback matchup every single week, and he's one of the easiest cornerback matchups against the Vikings as well. Extremely easy schedule rest of the season, and someone that's been a little bit down compared to where he was, someone you may be able to get at a discount. Now, do not send the farm for this one, but Bijan is definitely a player that is buyable. Tyler Algier actually has more touchdowns than Bijan this season, stole some of his touchdowns in week 10, and the managers are frustrated. But we do see a relatively easy or at least medium schedule rest of season against Carolina, the Saints, the Jets, who just sold their whole defense, the Seahawks, which are pretty tough, but that could lead to some passing upside, a little bit less Algier, some Tampa Bay, Arizona, and then the Rams in the championship. But he's someone I think you can buy a little bit lower, but you still have to pay up. But don't send the farm for this guy. He is a little bit of a risk with Algier stealing his touchdowns, but he's definitely a little cheaper than he has been for this entire season. Number 4, hey, it's Franklin, Troy Franklin of the Denver Broncos. We look over the last 4 weeks, we see 37 targets, 10, 8, 10, 9. The minimum he's gotten over the last 4 weeks is 8 targets. He's standing out. Sutton is taking the defense away, and he's getting the targets. And we look at this schedule, absolutely amazing. Week 11 against Kansas City and week 17 against Kansas City, he actually may have an easy matchup. I know it looks difficult, but Trent McDuffie, their best corner, is probably going to be on Courtland Sutton, leaving Franklin a much easier and much more likely to be targeted matchup against a weaker corner. And then the rest of this, Washington, the Vegas, Green Bay, Jacksonville, extremely favorable matchups. So someone I'm trying to buy, someone that doesn't have the biggest name value, someone you may be able to get a little bit cheaper than he should be. Our QB waiver ad available in 48% of leagues. He's just the best option out there, literally in almost half of leagues, is Joe Flacco. Now, one thing I will mention is that Joe Burrow, he's going to start practicing today. He's trying to come back week 13 to face the Ravens. So that's something to watch out for. But at least for the next few games, Joe Flacco is an amazing ad and someone that can lead you to wins in those particular weeks. Now, our buy-sell player of the week is Omari Hampton. First, I'm going to talk to those of you who need to sell. Those are you guys that are trying to make that final playoff push, and you can't afford to lose him week 11 and week 12. And I know it sucks, but he's almost back, which is going to increase his value. And he's supposed to come back week 13. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Is he going to be full speed? He's going to have full volume. So he may even not be startable for the next 3 weeks. And without that, we're probably not making playoffs. So I would look to someone in the playoffs and try to sell high, act like he's going to score 25, 27 points when he returns. Be like, hey, I can't eat it for the next 2 weeks, but you can because you're already in playoffs. So send me a slightly worse player and try to get a really good deal. But if you're already in playoffs, and someone in your league who's not making playoffs has him on the roster, I would send a lowball offer and say, hey, man, you can't afford to hold this guy for the next 2 weeks. There's no way you even sniff playoffs if you have this guy on your roster because you need players who are playing now. And send them a lowball offer. Try to get him for your team, giving Hampton a buy low if you're already in playoffs, and try to sell high if you're trying to make the playoffs. And with that said, I'd also trade away Kamani Vidal with just one more week of value before the bye week and Hampton comes back. And that's it. That is your no BS clutch trades before week 11 of fantasy football. Make sure you hit that subscribe to join the community. I really appreciate that. Really supports the channel. And drop any start sit questions, trade questions you have down in the comments. I'll be trying to answer every single one.